Hey guys, my name is Ryan, and we're back again with another Spirit Island video. The goal of this channel is to give you, the viewers, the tools you need to build up the knowledge and confidence to try higher difficulty games. They say one of the best ways to learn a subject is to teach it, and by having to articulate different concepts in the game, I feel like I've been improving as well. Recently, I decided to turn this channel's goal back on myself and push for a higher difficulty. So at this point, I'm very comfortable against all level 6 adversaries with the majority of the spirits. So how can we further increase difficulty? Well, double adversaries. The rules for double adversaries are on page 19 of the Jagged Earth rulebook. So we can take a look at this, and it says that you have two adversaries. One of them is going to be designated as the leading adversary, and one of them is going to be designated as the supporting adversary. For whatever level that you choose for each adversary, you follow all of the rules for both of the adversaries, for whatever levels you chose. In addition, there are a lot of setup changes. So first, let's talk about the fear deck. You're going to start with the base 3 fear cards in each terror level, and then you're going to add the marginal difference to each. So the example to show here is with a 3-4-3 fear deck and a 4-4-4 fear deck. The marginal change is 0-1-0 and 1-1-1. So you would wind up with a marginal increase of 1-2-1 and end with a 4-5-4 fear deck. Okay, so escalation. One of the adversaries is leading, like I said, and the other is supporting. The leading adversary does its escalation as normal, but the supporting adversary will have its escalation effect apply on all stage 3 cards. France and Sweden are terrain specific, so those you basically just flip a coin in order to decide which terrain you will escalate on. And then the invader deck. So in case both adversaries change the invader deck, you execute the supporting adversary's invader deck changes first, and then the leading adversary changes second. So that's the only one that can be a little counterintuitive. You lead with the supporting, and then you follow with the leading when you make the changes to the invader deck. On the right side, there's a couple corner case situations where you might make some modifications on certain adversaries, but otherwise, it's actually pretty straightforward to set up a double adversary game. Recently, my friends and I decided to start playing some double adversary games where both adversaries are at level 6. This is the first video in a short series documenting the game. I've invited all the other guys to add their thoughts and comments, so you might hear some other voices sprinkled into these videos. But before we do that, I had to explain how we played the game, since it was atypical. Normally, you play Spirit Island as a physical game on the table with your friends physically present. For the videos I make, I record games on the official Spirit Island app made by Handelabra or the Tabletop Simulator mod. But for this game, we did what is called a play-by-post. A play-by-post is analogous to chess by mail in that it is slower paced, fully text-based way to play. On the Spirit Island Discord server, there's about 10 games running constantly. Each game has an upload channel where you can submit detailed explanations of your turns, and a discussion channel where you can negotiate and debate the optimal way to play the turn. Paired with every game, there is also a website, and it keeps track of the minor and major power deck, as well as necessary resources for each player, such as energy and elements. In this game, I'm playing as Devouring Teeth, and we can see that I've got 0 energy right now. You can see that I've got these 3 cards in play. These 2 cards are in hand, but are not in play. And then these 3 cards are in my discard pile. So it gives you little actions for each of these. You can reclaim, forget, play, unplay, things like that. And also, we can see all the cards that are now in the discard pile or have been forgotten over the course of the game. One player acts as the game host, and they will have a game running as a save file on Tabletop Simulator. After all the players have submitted their turns, such as what we have here, they will upload a screenshot of the game after having executed all of those actions. This helps the players keep track of exactly what's going on turn over turn. I think this is a fantastic way to play the game. Since it's slower paced than playing live, you can play at a higher difficulty or with a worse matchup than you might normally be comfortable with, and you will have more time to think out your plays. If you would like to try a PvP, join the Discord with a link in the description. Go to the role selection channel here, and then to this message here, you're going to react with this time emoji. This will give you the PvP role, so whenever there is a ping for anyone who wants to do a PvP, you will get notified. Go down to Play by Post, go to PvP Lobby, and here is where we basically will launch new games. So just the other day, another PvP was launched. They pinged, they said, hey, we're going to be doing Scotland 6, right? And in this one, they said we can only do the new stuff. Cool. And then you can react saying that you want to join that game. So with all that said, let's talk 6-6. A 6-6 is extremely hard. All of your moves must be precise and done with consideration to how everyone else will be moving. So the first thing to do when attempting a 6-6 is make sure you have the right people to play with. I played this game with Flo, Aru, and Celentano. Those guys have been featured on this channel before, and we have great chemistry and experience together. As we're going to see over the course of this game, we will all make mistakes. We will all see other ways that other players can play their turns better, and we will all be told what we can do better by the others. I think it's crucial that there is mutual trust and respect among all players in a team in order to perform at a higher level. If I make a mistake, it's imperative that someone else sees it and calls it out. And it's equally important that I do not get offended by this. We're all here for the common goal of winning at extreme difficulty. So in the game we're going to review in this series, it was actually the second 6-6 I've ever played. The first was finished just hours before this one started. The adversary was Prussia 6 leading France 6. I played Ember-Eyed Behemoth, Flo played Eyes Watch from the Trees, Aru played Relentless Gaze of the Sun, and Selly played Fractured Days Split the Sky. It was a fun and challenging game to play with a disproportionate amount of events that severely hurt us. Fractured Days plus Relentless Gaze of the Sun is a nasty combo with absurd repeats. If Sun has repeated a card a couple times, it can be very expensive to keep doing so. However, if that card is reclaimed and replayed via slip, then now it's considered a new card and Sun's repeat tax resets. You can see in these fear counts that that combo was key to victory. As fun as that game was, at the end of the day, having Prussia in a double adversary game just doesn't feel too special. Really, it's just France 6 with a worse invader deck. We wound up winning with just one blight left on the Blighted Island card, so it was a very stressful game, but we prevailed. Just 2 hours after declaring victory, we immediately started planning the next one. We wanted to pick the adversary first and then pick Spirits second, who would work well in that matchup. Well, all of these conversations are saved via text, and I could give an exact script of what happened. We're talking thousands of messages that bled across different channels and DMs, so I think it's better just to give an overbroad summary. We started with a randomizer, which came up as France leading, Scotland supporting, but someone recommended that we be the first to do doubles with Habsburg Mining Expedition. The funny interaction with HME and Scotland invader decks was mentioned, and that's what we ultimately went with. For some reason, there was a really long conversation about doing Habsburg Livestock Colony with either Scotland or HME, but in the end, we decided to do Scotland and HME together. So Scotland plus HME leads to a fascinating invader deck. From beginning to end, it goes 1, 1, 2, Salt, 3, Coast, 2, and then 3s for the end. 3, 3, 3, 3. So you have this section in the middle where it's very deterministic, right? We know exactly what card is here and exactly what card is here. There's only 2 stage 2 cards, and then there's a lot of stage 3 cards. So the massive gap in quantity of 2s and 3s is important, since your leading adversary is only going to escalate twice, but your supporting adversary is going to escalate 5 times. So we decided that Scotland escalation is harder to deal with than the HME one, so we set Scotland as leading and HME as supporting. In addition to the big difference in the quantity, the HME escalation can be made weaker or skipped entirely. And we didn't get it this time, but let's just say that we had these 2 cards switched in place. When these 2 cards are both showing, then HME only escalates into a land that is not showing in the invader actions, and so there would be no escalation at all here. So while HME can be skipped or weakened, Scotland is always going to be the same, which means it's just going to be a little bit stronger overall. Getting into the late game with these types of interactions, it's possible we could just cruise through to the finish. I do think that there is an interesting argument for actually switching it though, where we would have HME escalate on the 2s and Scotland escalate on the 3s. Even though it is more raw power for the Scotland escalation, delaying that for 2 turns could give us more time to be prepared for it. And then by the time we get to these late stage 3 cards, we're already all going to be so well set up that it really doesn't make a difference anyways. But alas, we elected to do Scotland leading, HME supporting. So now that we have the adversary set, now we need to pick spirits that are up to the task. Right off the bat, we decided that we did not want to do any silly cheese strategies. Things like Fractured Days and Rampant Green, where Fractured slips the Gift of Proliferation 1,000,000 times and you clear all your presence tracks by turn 4. Or Serpent plus Memory doing a very similar hyper-proliferation strat. After a bit of discussion, we elected to do a fair game without spirits like Fractured Days, Green, and Stone, which tend to just break the game in half. A reasonable place to start when thinking about which spirits to pick is which spirits have a good matchup into both HME and Scotland independently, which you're also personally comfortable playing. Almost immediately, Selly said that he wanted to play Dances Up Earthquakes on board C, intending to do a turn 4 Quake. He talked about how he played this matchup solo and it felt really good, so he could bring it into the 6-6 with confidence. If you wanted to be a sourpuss, you could get mad that someone locked in a spirit so fast without deeply discussing it with the team, but I'm actually really happy it played out like this. This gives the team an anchor around which to make their decisions. One of the most annoying things that can happen is the so-called Canadian standoff, where everyone is trying to be so polite and deferential to everyone else that nothing gets done. The other 3 of us largely picked our spirits simultaneously, so what did we have to consider? Since Selly was planning on doing an Earthquake on turn 4, that means turns 1 through 3 he's just barely keeping his head above water. We want to pick spirits that are strong in those first 3 turns, or else the island will simply be fucked. The first thing that came to my mind is the scary interaction between HME 1, 6, and Scotland 5. Exploring and creating a mining land to ravage on turn 1 in a coastal land is double trouble when combined with the extra blight. My first thought was to play Sharp Fangs, so I did a 2-player game with Flo where I played Encircle Fangs and he played Many Mines for that beast synergy. I thought the blight restrictions on base Fangs would be terrible in the mid-game once the Soul card entered into the Ravage slot. Many Mines felt great, but Fangs fell so far behind and ultimately was the reason we lost that game. I even drafted Flocking Red Talons, but ultimately it felt like Fangs was not the solution. Our testing did give us insight into how brutal the mid-game was with Salt into Stage 3 into Coast, and we expected it would be our make-or-break point in the game. Ocean is the single most efficient unit killer in the game with a passive Destroy All effect. It is reliant on good teammates though, both to feed you invaders and to solve your inland. I wound up choosing to play Deep's Ocean paired with Aru picking Travel River. It's a classic, incredibly powerful combination. Flo was the last to pick, and he identified the powerful combination of Many Mind's boon of Swarming Bedevilment in combination with Travel River's innate defense plus Dahan movement as a means to have early invader control. He then identified how Ocean, River, and Dances Up Earthquakes all have a support card which gives out free energy, so he could go for a super greedy, full bottom track build. And so that's what he picked. So now we have our spirits locked in, just have to pick the boards. As previously mentioned, Selly wound up picking board C for Dances Up Earthquakes, and then Aru picked A for Travel River. That just left me and Flo. Ocean doesn't really care about the specific board it's on, it only cares about the distribution of coastal lands, so I let Flo pick first. He wound up picking board E. I knew that I did not want to have two boards with matching land number 2s, since that's the hardest one for me to deal with, and it would increase the likelihood of getting crushed by Scotland 5. This meant I had to pick one of the boards with a jungle in land number 2. So that leaves me to pick between boards D and boards F. Board D evokes a lot of bad feelings against Scotland, and it was already discussed as something that we should not play. Therefore, I picked board F, and we're off to the races. Before I go, I want to take a minute to discuss all the rules of Scotland and HME and how they interact with each other. So you can see the way right here on the screen how they would get set up with the extra city in land number 2, and then all of the extra additions because of Habsburg Mining Expedition. But let's draw our attention down here to all these reminder tokens for actions. As we can see, there are 2 modifiers for the Ravage, there's 1 modifier for After Ravage, 2 modifiers for Build, a modifier for After the Build, and 2 modifiers for Explore. So there are 8 different rules that are going to be changing the way that this game plays out. And that is a lot to keep track of. That's a serious amount of mental overhead. So just to run through step by step. In the Ravage step, we have mining lands, are lands that have 3 or more invaders, and those ravages are skipped by disease. And for Scotland, level 5, if a coastal land blights, then it adds an additional blight to the ocean. Scotland 6, after Ravage, any inland lands that ravage or are in the Ravage card slot, you add a town to them after that Ravage. As long as there's an adjacent, or if there's a town or city within range 1, which could also mean target itself. In the build step, we once again have HME 1, so once again the whole mining lands thing. When it's in the build slot, that means it's going to ravage instead of build, but either way, a disease will stop the action in this build slot. Scotland 3 says that a coastal land with no invaders in it will still build so long as there's an adjacent city. After the build, we have the mining boom, so that's HME 5, and that says you have to pick a land with an explorer, you have to do a build there and an upgrade. Then on the explorer, we have 2 modifiers. So Scotland 1 says that if you explore a coastal land, you add a town instead of an explorer. And then HME 6 says that as long as there is 3 or fewer blight on your board, you add an extra explorer every time that you explore. So if it's a coastal explorer, you will add a town and an explorer. since your normal explorer becomes a town, and then you supplement with an additional explorer. The big thing, though, in this game is the interaction between Habsburg Mining Expedition 4 and Scotland 6. So eventually we'll get to this point in the game where we now have the Salt Deposits card in the Ravage step. That means for every turn for the rest of the game, since this card does not leave, if it is a mining land after Ravage, you will then add a town to it. Okay, now this checks after the Ravage, not before the Ravage. So let's just say that we have a mining land, let's just say we have like this going on, and we hit it with a Defend 5. So it would Ravage, the Dahan would counterattack and kill a town, and now it only has 2 invaders, it is not a mining land, and therefore does not get hit by Scotland 6. So anytime that we can use Dahan and Defend effectively on a mining land on the inlands, it's very powerful to do so. Of course, don't forget, we have both lost conditions. So for Scotland, because it's a 4-player game, if there are 9 coastal lands that have a city in them, we lose. And the fact that we're using deeps means that we can change the quantity of coastal lands that exist, or change which lands are coastal, depending on the drowning pattern that we use. And there's also the HME loss condition, which says that at the end of the fast phase, if there is 8 or more total invaders plus blight in a single land, you lose. So there is a lot of pressure with the salt card, and the coastal card does a really good job of pressuring both of these simultaneously. Like if we clean out the coast, let's say we have a mountain jungle as a coastal land, like this board E, right? We would explore non-mining lands, right, which could do something like this. And then we would explore the mountain jungles, which could do this. And then we explore the coast, which could then do that. Really easy in that stretch of time to put significant pressure for both loss conditions simultaneously. Anyways, that's about it for the introduction, and we'll be back shortly for the first few turns of this game. Thanks guys, see you on the next one.